Welcome, I am Haya Shulman. Our Women in Cybersecurity conference series is organized by ATHENE. ATHENE is the German National Research Center for Applied Cybersecurity, established in 2019 and is now Europe's largest center in cybersecurity and one of the largest worldwide. The conference is supported by the Hessian Minister for Science and Art, Angela Dorn, and Women in International Security Deutschland is our strategic conference partner. Today we talk about Digitalisierung and Digitale Souveränität, or in English, digital transformation and digital sovereignty. We are all aware of the need to digitalize the services and the infrastructure, digitalizing the education, the medical care, the production, the critical infrastructure, smart cities. We need all of this. So this digital transformation reduces the costs and increases efficiency, provides easy access, and is a very important aspect of modern societies. We hear this on a daily basis. But this comes with threats, this digitalization. You probably need to purchase components such as hardware and software from other countries. Do you trust these countries? What if there are backdoors which will be used to spy on you, to steal your personal or private data, to install malware on your computer and devices? Who can we rely on as trustworthy partners? Should we aim to produce everything ourselves? Is that the right strategy? What is the situation of digitalization and digital sovereignty in Germany? To answer these questions, we start with the following. An Israeli is moderating a discussion on international collaboration in cybersecurity between a Russian and Germans. No, this is not a beginning of a joke, but a completely serious and important topic. Today we have three speakers which will talk about these issues from the perspective of politics and industry. I'm pleased to introduce Andreas Koenen, the head of Department Cyber and IT Security at the Federal Ministry of Interior, Building and Community. Susanne Dehmel, she is executive board member of the digital association Bitkom. This is the German high-tech industry association. She is also the co-initiator of She Transforms IT. And Eugene Kaspersky, he is the founder and CEO of Kaspersky. Each of our speakers will start with a short keynote where they will tell us about what they do in their position and what their take on this topic is of digital transformation and digital sovereignty. After the keynotes, we will have a panel discussion with our speakers, and you will have the opportunity to post questions in our chat. If time allows, we will ask our speakers. Our plan is to finish by 4 p.m. Berlin time. Our first speaker is Andreas Koenen. Andreas Koenen is the Director General responsible for cyber and information security of the German Federal Ministry of the Interior. In this role, he is responsible for all cybersecurity matters of the German government. Before that, Andreas held several key positions in the government, including the roles of Vice President of the Federal Office for Information Security, the BSI. Andreas Koenen is one of the most prominent cybersecurity experts in Germany. Andreas will talk about no digital sovereignty without cybersecurity, or the role of cybersecurity in digital sovereignty. Welcome, Andreas. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Haya, and welcome to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be here today and to have the chance to give you an introduction to the difficult topic of digital sovereignty, especially when it comes up to cybersecurity. As you already heard, the topic of my speech today is without cybersecurity, there's no digital sovereignty. But what does this mean in depth? So, Germany is a high-tech country in which information and communication technology is of vital importance for all areas. The associated increasing dependence on information and communication technology of our economies, societies, and democratic processes also increases the risk of IT-based processes failing or attacks on the confidentiality and integrity of these systems. For the protection of our national economies, societies, and democratic processes, the security of the ICT is of paramount importance for state and economy. Unfortunately, it can be stated that the threat situation in cyberspace remains at a high level and gets even more complex. And one special example is for sure the weakness in the Microsoft Exchange server, as we have seen during the last few weeks. Ransomware, for example, continues to be one of the greatest threats to companies, authorities, and other institutions, as well as to private users. Again and again, there are complete failures of computer and networks, but also of production systems, automobile manufacturers and their suppliers, various airports or airlines, but also small and medium-sized companies were attacked. For companies, this always means a loss of reputation and high economic damage. Community institutions have also been the target of repeated ransomware attacks recently. This also includes, for example, hospitals in Germany that are particularly challenged by the pandemic. The importance of our health system as critical infrastructure is clearly visible. Taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic shows that cyber criminals are quick to respond to socially relevant topics and trends and have no scruples about exploiting a social emergency. State and economy have to take care of it, legally, politically, and organizationally. The federal government is aware of its responsibility. With the IT-Security Act in 2015, we provided a building block for strengthening the BSI and for the resilience of critical infrastructures. In order to create and maintain a permanently high level of protection in regard to the growing threat situation, the legal framework must be continuously reviewed and adapted to new threats. With the draft law of a second IT security law, which is currently in the parliamentary process, we are adapting the legal framework to this situation. These are in particular the strengthening of the BSI with expanded tasks and powers for secure government networks, but also improvement for the protection of consumers, critical infrastructures, and other branches of the economy. Operators of critical infrastructures are obliged to comply with IT security standards and to report IT security incidents. However, an expansion to other areas is necessary. Here we see an obligation, among other things, for the hardware and software suppliers of core components for critical infrastructures, as well as other companies in which there is a special public interest. This applies, for example, to the waste disposal, chemical and armaments industries, but also to the companies that make an outstanding contribution to value creation in Germany, in particular the large companies. By assigning consumer protection to the BSI as an explicit task, we are strengthening it as a neutral advice center for questions about IT and cybersecurity. In this context, it is planned to introduce a uniform and voluntary IT security label. This makes the IT security functions, especially of products in the consumer segment, visible and comprehensible to citizens for the first time. The IT security label acts like an always up-to-date electronic package insert. The BSI plays a central role in all issues relating to IT and cybersecurity in digitization. This is shown by the expansion of tasks and the growth in personnel in the recent years. The BSI received 150 additional posts with the 2020 budget. With the IT Security Law 2.0 and the newly added tasks and obligations, a further 873 positions for IT security are to be added to the BMI's division. I will now focus on digital sovereignty, which is indispensable for the success of a digital change. For me, digital sovereignty means that individuals and institutions can use the digital world independently and safely. Restrictions on the free choice of information and communication technology, products and services must be prevented. Where can these restrictions come from? Initially, restrictions can arise due to dependence on one or a few providers of technologies or services. Due to these dependencies, the providers can link the use of their products and services to conditions that they may impose on the customers. Such monopoly-like supply systems and the resulting dependencies and constraints must be prevented. But it is also not a solution to replace the monopoly-like provider systems with self-sufficiency. That means the self-chosen restriction on one's own products and services. Self-sufficiency ensures that there is no pressure from monopoly-like provider structures, but self-sufficiency reduces choice to own production skills. The compulsion can arise here due to the lack of alternatives. Self-sufficiency completely ignores free trade, which enables trading partners to choose between the best products and services worldwide, which is much more efficiently and effective, where it makes economic sense. Information and communication technology should always be obtained through free trade. The condition for digital sovereignty is self-determined ability to act. This requires the unlimited choice of technology and manufacturer, the availability of trustworthy products, and competitiveness of our own and trustworthy production. The following requirements must be met to achieve this. First, an expansion of the assessment competence for the use and security of ICT. We have to be able to make confident decisions. Second, we need the ability to develop hardware and software for future technologies and trends. To do this, we need to have trustworthy production capacities wherever they come from. Third, we have to develop the necessary regulatory requirements, for example, to enable the controllable use of safety-critical technologies. To this end, test procedures and techniques for continuous certification must be developed. It is particularly important to promote the use of open standards and interfaces in order to reduce or avoid dependencies. At this point, it becomes obvious that cybersecurity and digital sovereignty are imperative for the success of digitization. This is exactly what the Federal Ministry of the Interior is working on in a large number of different projects and initiatives. I will give you a few examples of this. We promote competitive, trustworthy information systems. Based on current innovative developments in hardware and software production with a focus on cybersecurity, competitive, trustworthy IT systems of new quality can be produced. That means by creating an ecosystem for trustworthy IT systems, hardware and software design, information and business relationships become competitively available. Another example is the Agency for Innovation in Cybersecurity, set up jointly with the Ministry of Defense, the Cyber Agency, which started its work at the end of 2020. With the Cyber Agency, we will promote and finance key technologies with high innovation potential. In this way, cybersecurity technology with importance for internal and external security in Germany and Europe. And third, BMI advocates the high security standards for 5G networks. In order to achieve this, technical requirements for the secure operation of the 5G networks will be prescribed by law via the security catalog according to paragraph 109 in the telecommunications law. But also we will prescribe trustworthiness criteria to the vendors of such ICT and 5G equipment to define for the first time trustworthy as a category that also can be maintained by regulation. For me, Germany has to take a leading role again in this important technology. In the interest of building digital sovereignty in 5G, it is necessary to create a strong industrial ecosystem for key technologies in the field of mobile networks in Germany and Europe. We therefore promote development, standardization, test procedures and new business models along the chain. Dear listeners, the measures presented to you, which are by no means final, are intended to give cause for action and serve as a common basis for discussion. I would be delighted to work with you to reach the next milestones in terms of digitization, cybersecurity and digital sovereignty. Thank you very much.
Andreas, thank you very much for this extremely interesting and insightful presentation on the topic. So you are saying that certification can help replace trust in facilitating digital sovereignty and allow collaboration with other partners, which would, for instance, supply certain components in a chain, right?
Yeah, right. That's one pillar.
Possible, yeah.
It's exactly the technical part. We need to put trust in some ecosystem or some product or some offer of a service. That means certification gives you the insight you need to value the technical realization, for example, of confidentiality, availability, and integrity. That's very important. That's one pillar. And the second one is the trustworthiness you can put in a company itself. That it comes out of an ecosystem, out of a democratic surrounding, which gives the manufacturer the ability to produce this technically certified product, and there is no backdoor in it, and especially there's no way to interfere with the customer in the end and its own IT security system.
Yeah, so excellent strategy, replacing trust with technology to facilitate this digital sovereignty in Germany. Thank you, Andreas, very much. We then will pick up in our panel. Now we are moving on to our next speaker. Oh, by the way, if you have questions, our audience, if you have questions for Andreas Koenen, you can post your questions in a chat and we will later ask Andreas during the panel. Thanks again, Andreas, and we are moving to our next speaker. Susanne Dehmel is a Managing Director, Law and Security at the Federal Association for Information Technology, Telecommunication and New Media, Bitkom. So this is the association of the German high-tech industry. In her formal role, she was head of Department Data Protection since 2010. She is a lawyer and did her studies in Germany, Passau, Freiburg and Cardiff. Before taking over the Data Protection Department, she was responsible for copyright law and intellectual property issues. Susanne is engaged in encouraging trust and security in the digital world and the development of a modern legal framework for the information society, and has also initiated She Transforms IT to encourage more females to look into a career in IT. Susanne will tell us about the link between digital participation, digital sovereignty, and cybersecurity. Welcome, Susanne, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Haya. Thank you for having me. Yeah, you said it. I want to talk about the link between digital participation, digital sovereignty, and cybersecurity today, taking a slightly different angle maybe from the usual sovereignty talks, but I think this is a very important aspect we have to look at. When we look over the past year, we have experienced an impressive pandemic-driven digitalization surge. This was long overdue, but now we have it and we have to shape this digitization to make it a sustainable one. And we see very clearly that we have to work on the things we haven't dealt sufficiently with in the past. As one part of digital sovereignty is users who are able to use digital means in a competent and self-confident way. And to put users into this situation, we do not only need better digital education, but we also need functional digital means that are easily usable in a secure way. So how do we reach that state? There is certainly no cure-all, and we need to make use of all available knowledge, all our resources, and all ideas that we have at our disposal. So we need all IT experts we can get to build good new technologies and secure, resilient, and usable systems. But so far, Europe has not exploited its full potential. For Germany, we are among the lowest ranked countries in Europe when it comes to women working in the IT industry. More precisely, we are talking about mere 17%. So this is not only a waste of potential, it becomes more and more a clear obstacle to the frequently invoked necessity to come up with new technologies to spearhead innovation. Without overcoming persistent gender stereotypes and guaranteeing digital participation at all levels, I think we will not succeed in thinking ahead digitization. And that is why a broad alliance decided to take action and come up with the initiative She Transforms IT. Actually, the initial two women who had the idea were Anna Christmann, a German member of parliament from the Greens, and Iris Plöger from the BDI, the German Industry Association. So I'm a part of it, and the initiative's uniqueness lies in its interdisciplinarity, I think. So we have women from politics, from the economy, from science, as well as from the civil sector. We are all involved. Many of them are already involved in networks in that area already. So we try to draw women's attention to the attractiveness of challenges in IT and digital, in the digital sector, as well as drawing attention to the innovative and economic potential of women, thus making the digital economy in Germany more accessible for them. And moreover, we want to give visibility to women who are already doing a great job in the IT sector so that they can be role models and an inspiration for others. So why do I mention all this in a context where I'm supposed to talk about cybersecurity and digital sovereignty? Well, I think for too long, female students are underrepresented in STEM-related fields, meaning the broadly defined areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. All areas that are crucial for our digital sovereignty and our understanding of it. And so I think we really have to think over our pictures we have concerning people who can bring forward these areas. So to make it a little bit more tangible by focusing explicitly on the field of cybersecurity, I think all of us are very well aware of the fact that there is a worldwide staffing shortage in the ranks of cybersecurity professionals. And the problem will get worse as the demand for cybersecurity resources is expected to grow dramatically. We've just heard the BSI alone, another 800 new people. So we see this shortage as a real problem, and we need to fill the gap, which could be substantially closed if one segment of the population were proportionally represented in this industry: women. The dramatic rise in cybersecurity demands and the general shortfall in the available talent pool are now shedding a bright light on the lack of women in the field. And this is only the most obvious and rational facet reflecting the dire need for more female participation in the cybersecurity industry. We should also take into consideration all the advantaged soft skills women bring to the industry. And it's a fact that diverse teams are more successful. In the same way as hybrid attack vectors require a holistic defense strategy, cybersecurity teams must reap the benefits of a diverse team structure to efficiently encounter all kinds of threat scenarios. So all these are strong arguments for recruiting and supporting more female talents. But I think there is no easy or fast solution for the apparent shortage of female workers in the IT industry in general, in the field of cybersecurity in particular. But I think we can double our efforts, analyze what efforts of the past worked or what and why they didn't work. We have to pay attention to the details and put all the pieces together. It starts in the school and kindergarten, continues in the choice of your studies, your time at university, goes on the professional career. We need empowerment, incentives, support programs, and role models at all stages of a personal career path. Unfortunately, there are already plenty of successful women that can be viewed as positive role models and even as mentors for other women to gain foothold and succeed in the field of cybersecurity. When it comes to science and research, we have one of the best examples and role models with us today. It's our host, Haya Shulman, who recently won the prestigious IT-Security Award of the Horst Goetz Foundation for her outstanding scientific achievements in the field of DNS security. And so coming to an end, I would like to highlight that positive transformation is evident and underway. And I think we must make it count now, as politics can only provide the framework, and all of us must drive the transformation ourselves. Thank you.
Susanne, thank you so much for this interesting presentation, and thank you for congratulating me. I very much appreciate it. It was great to take part in the conference and participate in the competition. I have a question for you. So you mentioned the role of women in digital sovereignty and in cybersecurity. I must ask you this. What is the role, in your opinion? We are talking about Germany, right? So what is the role of childcare, Kinderbetreuung in Germany, in allowing women to take active part in this digitalization or digital transformation and digital sovereignty?
Of course, it's a very important factor whether you can have a good place to leave your child when you go on to work. And I think in Germany we have different traditions of this, and we have come quite far during the last few years with improving childcare and enable women to work. But I think we're still not as far as other European countries are there in this regard. So we're still working on that.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you that the role models and showing to women that IT can also be suitable for them and interesting discipline. But I think one of the main problems in Germany that I firsthand experienced actually is the childcare. There is none. So I'll put it like this. There is not enough. And I am coming from Israel. I can tell you this was so surprising because in Israel you have the problem of choosing which one you want. And women have the option to send their children to childcare from 2 months after giving birth. I think one of the main problems, whether it's in IT or in anything else, is that in Germany the women actually don't have an option at all to involve themselves or develop their career. They have to choose between family and a career. And I think this is one of the main issues that the politic in Germany should consider addressing. It is really, surprising that the woman has to choose between sitting 3 years at home and taking care of her child or working. So I think this is one of the main hindrances towards enabling success of in integration of women in technical roles or in high technical roles, senior technical roles in Germany.
Yeah, I think we've got still huge differences. For example, in Berlin, I'd say it's not that big a problem because there are a lot of opportunities. But when you go to other cities or other rural areas, it looks different. So yes, that's really one of the many factors we have Berlin, to address.
There is a possibility to have childcare under the age of 1 year?
Yes.
Really? Oh, okay. So Berlin is different.
Both my children.
I want to move to Berlin. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll pick up with questions during the panel. Thanks a lot. Now we are moving to our next guest. Our next guest is so well known that I'm not sure how much information I really need to give to introduce you. He is world-renowned cybersecurity expert and successful entrepreneur. He is a co-founder and the chief executive officer of Kaspersky, one of the world's largest privately held vendor of endpoint protection and cybersecurity solutions. I met Eugene a few times in Israel and in Germany, and I don't know how he manages, but most chances you can meet Eugene at any prominent cybersecurity event around the globe. So we are really pleased that Eugene has taken the time to join us today and provide his view on digitalization and cybersecurity. Eugene will be telling us about international cooperation, transparency, and the change in mindset towards security by design. Welcome, Eugene Kaspersky. Over to you, Eugene.
Thank you, Haya, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Haya, may I ask a question? Actually, I've heard that you got you're the winner of the German awards, the IT-Security award, and it's research on the vulnerabilities.
That is correct.
First of all, I want to congratulate you, and I'd like to learn more about your research because we're also working on the vulnerabilities, and if it's maybe a good idea to cooperate in this issue.
Absolutely.
So later after the conference, I'd like to share some data with you.
So you know everything, I see. Thank you very much. Absolutely.
I have very good advisors.
Definitely.
Okay, so I have a short speech about their present situation in the cyber world and what we expect from the future, what we need to do to save the future. First of all, I'd like to just make some remark on the human history. For 100,000 years, the humans were living in a stone age. Then there was a bronze or iron age. Now some people say that we are living in an age of plastic because the plastic materials are most important. And what's the next? And I guess the next is it's a cyber age, when the data, then the cyber technologies is the most important material. It's not data, it's material, which is absolutely necessary for us. Moving to this cyber age, it's a kind of science fiction, because if you get back, like 25 years ago, there was the first mobile phones were introduced. Okay, so get 30 years ago, could you imagine the world with such a hyper-connected, with all these mobile technologies, all these computer networks, all these abilities to talk to so many people, having the video conferences? That was a kind of science fiction. And now we make the science fiction true. So we are fastly moving to the absolutely new world, where the cyber technologies, the data, is the most important. Actually, it's like living in a world, and the world helps you, which helps you to navigate your life. So takes the part of your daily job and makes it automatically. The cities, the megapolises, which are managed, smart megapolises managed by these technologies to optimize the traffic, to optimize the consumption and production. The industrial sector, which is now in the times of Industrial Revolution 4.0, it's all that about cyber. But unfortunately, there are barriers on the way to the perfect cyber world. And the first barrier it's a cybercrime. The second barrier is that the industrial sector is also vulnerable. And the third barrier is that the data is getting so critical. It's a part of critical infrastructure. So the nations, they are aware of that, and they want the major nations, the major economies, they want to pay more attention to the data and to the cyber technologies. Cyber technologies, both software and hardware. So the software stuff and the physical devices. So moving on this way, we have to solve these problems. And actually speaking about the cybercrime and these attacks on the individuals or enterprises, well, actually, it's quite a simple task, I believe, and we can work on that, and we can make it safer. And speaking about industrial sector, especially Internet of Things, I guess we need to redesign the technologies, we need to redesign the systems, and we need to build the new systems safe by design, secure by design, and I call it immunity. So design the systems which manage the infrastructure, especially critical infrastructure, in such a way that it's just unhackable. They're immune from the hackers' attacks. And third, the importance of data, importance of technologies we use in the major economies. That's a regulation. That's the government role is very important, and it's critically important to regulate the use of the data, to regulate the transparency of technologies, and I guess this is one of the major topics to speak during this session. And so on the way, we need to solve some issues. Well, actually, I said the three major barriers which stops us from moving to the perfect cyber age. So now we need to understand what kind of the moves we need to, what kind of things we need to do to reach that. Actually, first of all, it's developing the technologies, and to make these technologies transparent, and to develop in such a way that is easy to use these technologies, even from if you use it from the other nations. We need to build such a system which makes these technologies transparent to each other. The second issue is the education, because to implement all the systems and to develop the immune cyber world, we need brains and hands. So we need educated people, educated engineer. And I guess this is one of the major issue for such a nation as Germany. Europe, Germans were very well known with all the mechanical stuff. All the turbines, cars, all that made in Germany, it's just perfect. When it comes to cyber, how many German-speaking, great German-speaking cyber companies you know? SAP? Do you know anything else? Very well known around the world. So I'm afraid that, and I'm speaking about that when I speak to German audience, I speak all the time about this. You don't have enough of the cyber engineers. You don't have enough of the cyber development resources. Every nation has the same problem, but you are maybe on the top of the list, which really need to invest more into the cyber education. You need to move your kids from the traditional mechanical technologies to move them to stimulate them to pay more attention to cyber. Every nation will need more engineers, and Germany is one of the nations which will need more than others. So this is second task to do. That's education, the cyber education, especially for the industrial sector. And third, it's of course the government regulation. The government must be cyber in mind, not just to speak about that, but to implement. And in Germany, it's quite okay with that. But I just want to highlight it once again. We need to develop the government services in such a way that they are smart, they are fast, to have the country of the 21st century and the government of the 21st century being not just cyber with technologies, but being cyber in mind. So I guess those are very interesting tasks. Very ambitious tasks, and actually that's why I love cybersecurity, because being in this industry, it's never boring. There are the bad guys, there are the good guys, there are the evolution of the cyber technologies, and the new cyber age is coming. So that's very interesting life. Dangerous, but we will survive. We will fix all that. Thank you. Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. Thank you very much. Toda rabba. Very interesting insight. So actually, I wanted to ask you this question. So why do you think this is so in Germany? That you're right, Germany is leading in so many aspects, but in cybersecurity, exactly like you said, I thought myself that, okay, there is SAP and right, and you are saying this is education. You think it's only education? What do you think are other reasons? What do you think is lacking here in the German ecosystem that we don't have a German cybersecurity conglomerate like Kaspersky in Russia, like Checkpoint in Israel? What are the causes and how we could improve it? Except for education, what else do you think are the factors causing this?
I think that's it. Well, different nations, they're different nations because they are different nations. They have a different history, different culture, different habits. And in Germany, I guess it's if you're an engineer, you're mostly focused on the mechanical stuff, on the chemical stuff, so on the physical material stuff, not on the cyber. So I think the right way is to promote the cyber education, to promote the cyber tool for kids. To make some kids interested not just in following their fathers and grandfathers' way, but to find the new areas of development. It's a task for schools to provide more cyber trainings. What age the kids in Germany start to study program languages?
Well, in the school.
It's my question. I don't know.
In the school, I think it depends on the program, but so you are saying this is education, right? But I guess it's not so much different maybe in other countries with respect to education. In Germany, people do have expertise. In the universities, there is cybersecurity research in research institutes, which are German research institutes. They do not exist in other places in the world. They started in Germany, and still, you don't have so many. You don't have this. How you say it in Israel. You don't have the chutzpah. Like what you had, you said, we need this, you went and you did this. And somehow, maybe it's courage, maybe it's chutzpah, which exists in Israel. A person can wake up one day and say, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to start innovate, and I do a startup in Germany. Maybe it also has to do with the mentality or the character. What do you think? And if yes, what would you suggest how we can go about this?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of different reasons. So it's a combination of the mentality of the customs, and at the same time, maybe it's also a question to government. Do the German government do enough to invest into the IT startups? So maybe to open the IT startup village and make some taxation holidays for the companies in this village to stimulate, to enable German IT startups just to grow, to be there. I don't know, but actually, I think it's a very interesting topic for the separate discussion. How to make Germany to be one of the leading IT nations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I'll ask you another question. So we also have our intelligence collection about you. And we know where you travel. When all of us are in lockdown, you're actually going to the most deserted places on earth where you cannot even eat because the food freezes, right? And I have to ask you, how do they deal with digitalization and digital sovereignty? I think you wrote they have internet. Can you tell us a few words about this?
They have. Well, yes, recently I was in a very, very strange place, very cold place. They call it Pole of Cold. So the record temperature, it was minus 72 Celsius. I enjoyed, I've been there in January, so the record was minus 58. And they have internet.
Here we can see,
yes.
We can see the photos of this. This is on the Northern Pole. I don't think so many people reach that point.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's more cold than on the North Pole in January. So it's a really cool place. Well, actually, the surprise to me, Bo, that they have infrastructure. Actually, it's a village for about 1,000 people there. The permanent citizens, they live there. So in a winter time, they have a minus 60. sometimes. Wow. In the summertime, they have plus 40. So this is a place with a 100 Celsius between winter temperature and the summer temperature. And they live there, they survive there, and they have infrastructure. For example, in this, you just displayed the picture of the village. They have hot water in the houses. They have a boiling system there, so they have the centralized hot water infrastructure. That's absolutely crazy. They have internet.
They have internet. Yeah.
So I was really surprised.
The food freezes, and you said that you cannot really take pictures because it's impossible. The equipment froze, but they managed to have digital infrastructure. That is a surprise, indeed.
Yeah, about eat it inside.
Okay. Eugene, thanks a lot for this super interesting presentation and for telling us about your travel. By the way, any of our audience, if you're interested, you can read Eugene's blog about his travels. Super interesting with a lot of photos and explanations. Thanks a lot, Eugene. We are now, audience, if you have any questions, you can post them for our speakers. You can post them in chat now. We are moving to the panel with our three speakers. And notice, these speakers, the three speakers that we have today, they're extremely busy. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you to ask them questions about cybersecurity. They will answer them pro bono. So ask about digitalization, digital sovereignty. They will tell you what they know. We are moving to our panel with our speakers. Thank you all very much for being here today. And I will start with questions. I'll ask you, each of you, questions. But first, I would like to ask Eugene, what do you think of digital sovereignty in Russia? For instance, for cloud computing or 5G, and the challenges that there are in Russia. Do you think they're the same? And I'm asking you as someone who knows Russia and someone who lives there, and someone who knows Germany. So do you think these are the same challenges as in Germany? Do Russian people have the same concerns and goals and questions as we have in Germany?
Yeah. Well, actually, honestly speaking, I'm not so much experienced in the details what's going on in my country because, well, my company is a global company. So I'm watching what's going on the world landscape, but not paying not so much attention to the details in my country. I'm sorry for that. But what's going on? It's first of all their data localization. So the data, the personal data, the enterprise data must be kept inside the borders, in-house. So it's a must, and I guess the same is going on in the many other nations. In the major economies, they are very serious about to have the data. The domestic data must stay home. And this is actually it's a question of the national security, because data is getting so more important that to keep data abroad in some cases it's not secure. Well, I'm not speaking about Germany maybe, but maybe in EU. So most probably in the future, the data in EU, you must keep this data in the EU, within the EU borders as well. And second is the technologies localization. So the technologies which Russia use in the infrastructure, in the critical infrastructure, in the government sector, they have to be developed locally, or it has to have some kind of the localization within the Russian border, just to be sure that in case of need, Russia have access to these technologies to develop that, to keep develop that, or supporting that. It's what I know about the Russian project of the digital sovereignty.
Thanks for that. Andreas, do you know if the problems in other countries are similar to German problems when it comes to digital transformation and digital sovereignty? And can you give a few examples from other countries? Or do you think we have some specific situation which is different?
I think in general we are very comparable to our European neighbors, for example. If I talk to my French colleagues, I hear nearly the same issues Okay, it might differ if you look at it very closely, but in general, we have the question where to get our hardware and software products in a reliable manner. We have the same questions concerning digital services coming from the US mostly, and we have the same questions about storing data, as already Eugene mentioned. In the beginning, it's very similar, and if it comes up, for example, to questions on using cloud infrastructures for government purposes, then we are very similar again. The difference mostly occurs if you look more closely into our companies. For example, in France, there are not so many small companies as there are in Germany. And so looking at that, we have different problems. For my French colleagues, it's very natural to talk about two handful of partly state-owned companies when it comes up on communication issues, for example. So the situation is different. We don't have this in Germany, but we have this broader picture of nearly 300,000 small companies that go into the market. They have all their own way of dealing with digitization. That's a real big spectrum. And looking from that point of view, we have a real question for digital sovereignty, especially in those companies. Not so much on a government level, but there in the companies, there it's very, very urgent. And that differs from France or from the Netherlands or maybe Sweden.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking mainly about industry. So how can we decide, and you're talking about your experience with, in context with other countries, but how can we decide who is trustworthy, who can be relied on? You suggested that we cannot do this thing, digital sovereignty and digital transformation ourselves. You are completely right. How can we decide who is a trustworthy partner?
Yeah, first of all, clearly it comes up to the technical part. That's certification for sure. And especially looking at certification, we have a harmonized European way to do this. That's very important because this is the technical basis for digital sovereignty. Then we have to look at trustworthiness, and there things become complicated. Mostly trustworthiness is governed by the individual view a nation has on this question. And so it's not possible to define trustworthiness down to the very end for all of us in the European Union. And for example, the 5G toolbox expresses this very clearly. There's a common certification standard to be seen in future for 5G, but any of those nations of the 27 has to come up with a national security issue on trustworthiness. And that's exactly what we are trying to do in the new IT-Security Law 2.0. It's very complicated. It's a question how to define trustworthiness in a way so that anyone, any company especially, any vendor can look at this definition and say, okay, I'm compliant with this view, and I have to look at this in any of the other 26 nations in Europe. That's complicated, and so we have to do the next step to harmonize even this view on trustworthiness. But it's really complicated. We have been in many negotiations to do this, but there's no golden solution about this today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I would like to ask the three of you a question. Do you think, or which country do you think, or which three countries, if you can rank, that you would say they are digitally sovereign, or at least they are leading in digital sovereignty, in your opinion? Can we start with Susanne?
I find that a hard question to answer because probably, I don't know. I don't know that much in detail about all countries. I mean, we know that I think the US and China are already very aware of that topic, and for a long time other countries like Israel and Russia too, I suppose. I think it's those countries actually that are at the front of the technological development, and that are really, who know their key technologies and who are good at it. I think that's one of the most important factors. And then, as Andreas Koenen said, it's also the ability to look at the technical standards and to examine products that you want to that you don't produce yourself, but that you buy. So I wouldn't dare to say, well, this or that country is leading, because there are so many factors that play a role, I think. But maybe Andreas or Eugene are more bold in that answer than me.
Eugene, do you agree that Israel and the US are leading in digital sovereignty?
Well, actually, I think that there are no such a nation which is digitally sovereign right now. There could be some inhabited island somewhere in the ocean, completely digital sovereign, because they're not digital at all. That's it. Even parrots are not digital. But the reality is that for decades, this world was being built as a global world, with borders which are getting less and less important, with people, technologies, and businesses traveling abroad for all the directions. The Iron Curtain fell in the 80s, and Russia joined the club. There are just very, very few countries, nations which are isolated from that, or self-isolated, or isolated, or half-isolated. So the world was built like this. And now we see, okay, so we depend on these technologies. We depend on cyber, and cyber doesn't have borders. But we still are nations. And unfortunately, because of this geopolitical situation, I like to use the political correct terms for this geopolitical situation. We see that, okay, so less and less trust between the regions. So it's getting more dangerous to use technologies which you don't understand what's inside. And that's why this is question about what's next, what we have to do. Because this global world, which was built for decades, now it's getting different. But we are not ready for that. And now we are looking for the solutions. And actually, the first solution is the digital sovereignty. The question, how we can build that, how we choose the nations or companies and technologies which we rely on. And I think that's, of course, I completely agree about certification. But plus to that, we need to be, well, it's also a question not just about certification, it's also the respect for the technologies, but it's a question of time, how long you know these technologies, how long you use these technologies, and second, the transparency.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I use the wrong term, the reputation of the technologies and transparency. Reputation, that's its time. The transparency, it's a wish of the companies or their vendors to disclose these technologies, to report what's inside and give the access to these technologies in case of need. So I think this is the way. And actually, do we have any nation which has their technologies they use, they're respected and transparent? No. Mm-hmm. So all the technologies, they could be respected but not transparent, or transparent but not respected. So both altogether, it's not a reality. So I think that's the right way, it's the right strategy is to build such a standards and to certify only the companies, only the technologies which you know for many years and which give you access to the source code, to the insights of these technologies. That's it.
That is right, and I think it's an excellent point that you can only have digital sovereignty in places where you do not have any digital anything on isolated island without anything. This is a correct statement. Now, but in source code, it's extremely difficult to analyze a source code, right? I mean, this is an unsolved problem to find backdoors in a source code or to understand what it does. So I agree that this is a good way to go with certification, but I am concerned that this is not really possible to do, right? I guess you all know this exactly. Andreas.
But actually,
yeah, clearly.
Please talk. I am not disturbing.
Why not? It's for sure very important for certification on a high level, especially to have a look into the source code. For sure, we wouldn't use several products in the federal government if we wouldn't have access to the source code, especially concerning the security relevant part of the source code. That's a part you can look at. It's well defined. It's mostly presented in a way so that you can check it. But one has to be clear about that. It's not possible to check the full source code. It's millions of lines. Even if you do it in an automated fashion, it's not possible. So in the end, you stay with a part where you just have to put trust in. And how much trust you want to put in depends on your own situation. If you want to use it for the government, then it makes a difference to using it in some instance where people use software for playing on their PC. You don't have to put too much trust into such a product. Clearly, it should function, it shouldn't hurt the security of the full system, but inside it's not so important whether it always stores correctly, let's say, the high scores of the game you were playing. So, but let's go back to the first question you put in the arena, Haya. That was the question on who is the strongest. Okay, in IT that can be answered easily by looking at the sums of millions and billions of dollars and euros spent on IT, and then it clearly comes up to US and China. But especially in that relation, we have seen some very important and interesting things happening. When the US president put on its presidential orders onto several Chinese companies, and that, for example, there shouldn't be delivered any kind of Android systems anymore to China, or that special chip generation shouldn't be delivered to China. It took only a few weeks until it became clear that this strikes back to the US, because those chips that couldn't be sold anymore to China were based actually on a manufacturing basis that again was in China, so that in the end even the US didn't get those components anymore. So clearly you see a vice versa dependency, and that's very important, and that shows there's no solution in self-sufficiency. There's only a solution in transparency, as Eugene says. And we have to find out what are the important mechanisms of making this transparency work. So, clearly.
I completely agree with you that there is no, like Eugene said, like you said, there is no real, and Susanne said this as well, there is no real country which is there is no country which is really digital sovereign. Everyone depends on everyone. China buys components from the US buys components from China, and that was a very good example what you used, of course, to the open source. To the providing code, I wanted to mention the example of open source. We all believed for many years that open source is secure and open source is good and so on. And a few recent very highly publicized bugs which happened with open source. Everyone can upload code to open source. Open source code, and let's even talk about bugs. There are a lot of bugs. There are projects which, recent projects which showed how many vulnerabilities in open source. Since everyone can upload code to open source, certainly it's possible to also encode backdoors in open source. And Even in open source, these things were not detected over a long period of time, the vulnerabilities. So do you think really that providing a code would solve the issue? This is one question to all of you. And the second question is, you yourself, Andreas, just mentioned an example where US is manufacturing something but using parts from or modules, equipment from China, right? So let's say you do an agreement with someone and you do certification, and they do certification, you trust them, but they themselves use components from some other third party. So when something happens, and let's say this device starts flooding your network or steals information from you, who is responsible? Who would you say did an attack? The one whose component you installed on a network, or because they used some component from some third party, which was the backdoor? You know, because components are very complex. We don't have one thing which one person or one entity generates. We use things which are composed of so many parts. We will often it is not even possible to attribute which of the parts started what. How is it possible, or do you think, all of you, yeah? The question really is to all of you, do you think it is possible to really certify this? And do you think this is a feasible problem?
If you like, I would open the discussion. First of all, clearly it's a huge problem if you take it at once. If you take it over as a full system, then you have no chance. You have no chance to make it work. So I like the model of openness, but I think open source alone is not the way to solve the problem. We have to go into other openness question, and the one I think about is open interfaces. We need open interfaces. We need to know how one system interacts with the other system. And we have then a double advantage. First of all, we can split up the problem. We certify components and their open interfaces to other components. So let's digest one step by step. And the other advantage that comes out of that is clearly the fact that then we open up the environment. We bring in small companies, for example, that can solve a part of the problem, and they can go into those open interfaces and deliver their trustworthy goods within a larger framework. And for example, to state it clearly, in 5G we need those open interfaces. We need to decouple what happens at the antenna from what happens in the network, and that's not possible today. We need open interfaces. We need to cut it up in pieces.
Susanne, Eugene, would you like to comment? Do you think?
Well, I think to provide these interfaces and to cut it up in pieces, that would certainly add to the transparency aspect, and also to the aspect that you also might be in a position to choose between the components of more companies. But at the same time, we probably also have some effects that there might be things might not always function as well together as in one whole product. So, but I think it's definitely worth to think in that direction. And then I think we also have to go a very risk-based approach, and like we certainly cannot look into every detail of every component and source code. So I see myself still here. I hope the connection is still working. So I hope you hear me at least.
We hear you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add. So maybe that's for the moment.
Eugene, would you like to comment, or?
Yeah, speaking about on this topic, I will say that, okay, so there are millions of the source code, the lines in the source code, but you don't really need to analyze all that. Only there's some critical parts of that. Second, you don't really need to analyze it before you use it. You simply need to have a guarantee that in case of any problem, you have to access and you can understand the problem yourself. Third, there have to be a guarantee that if the vendor of this source code, of these technologies, is no more able to support these technologies, you have engineers trained to keep doing this job. This is first of all. Second, you're absolutely right that there need to be the standard interfaces, and actually all this stuff it has to be split into the easy to understand logic. And actually, that's what we do in our product. I'm very sorry, it's not advertisement, but that's exactly what we do in our products. And we license. They're not just we don't just sell the product, but we also license components. And these components, they have a very simple logic. So we have the very simple, well, not simple, but they're easy to understand interfaces. So that's absolutely right. And then you have the system which is split into the easy to understand logic, easy to understand blocks. And if you have a question to any of the blocks, you take this block, you take this box out of there, and inside it's the same. It's also easy to understand logic and also the different blocks. So they're getting deeper and deeper and deeper. You can get to the, if you have a problem, you get to the reason of this problem and easily solve that. That's it. And this is, I think this is the right way. And speaking about the open source, well, actually, I agree that, well, the open source is a good for the engineers. Well, actually, it's kind of, if you have a garage and you like to disassemble and assemble your car, this is the open source. If you want just to get into the car and drive it, it's not the case of the open source. In most of the cases, it's not open source. So you have to, that's the difference, actually.
Very philosophical view, you know.
That's fully right. I know some people, they use to put their cars in pieces, but they never get it together again. That's exactly.
Right. So what do you think about...
I hope there are no Linux fans, not Linux engineers in the audience. If there are Linux engineers in the audience, I'm very sorry for our comments.
Oh, no, I also agree actually with your comments. I am a Linux fan, but I think it's a correct statement actually. What do you think, all of you, about an initiative to build a European IT company which would create or generate or produce aspects or modules which Europe will identify as important and strategic or central? You know, you're right, Andreas, Eugene, all of you are right about we cannot do all ourselves. But would it not be a good idea? Look at, for instance, China, right? China invests a lot, and it started already 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, all of this, and look where it is now, right? If you start investing in some European such agency or company, you will not immediately see results, but this would ensure that in 10 years, for instance, Europe is in critical components and critical aspects has its own capabilities and technology. Do you think it would not be a good idea that Europe would identify what are the important parts that we should invest in and build expertise there and build ourselves and start now, and maybe in 5 or 10 years, I guess in 5 could also suffice, we could already have this ourselves and not rely on other countries. For instance, we would not have to buy them from China, we could produce them in Europe. Don't worry, you can all answer.
Just to remind you that I am in Moscow right now, in Russia, so we're not part of EU, but actually we can be part of this project just if you just outsource the development to Russia. Well, actually we have thousands of the very talented engineers, more than in Israel.
I think, Eugene, I'm sorry, they're all in Israel. I think you're mixing. All the engineers are now in Israel, actually. I think you knew this, no?
No, not yet. And actually, I know people which are returning back from Israel to Russia.
You're talking about yourself, right? I know you returned a few times from Israel to Russia. I saw you in Israel a few times. Okay, so.
Yeah, on the other hand, it's always the question. There are two, let's say starting points. One is the typical Airbus principle. That's where we did it in Europe. But actually, if you looked into that carefully, then you see that there were a lot of companies coming out of this business already before. That were, let's say, 10 small companies that were put together to build up Airbus. And so then in the end, there was success. Because there was a basis. There were engineers, they knew about what they are building, and there had to be a larger workforce to put it there. The second idea always is to put it on the green lawn. And I think that's not possible. You have to have some basis. You have to have at least some idea how you can transform some technological idea into a product and put it on the market. And so that we can follow on. We should work together much more closely with our European neighbors to find out those good ideas and to put it forward. Actually, that's done. There are the large projects of the European Union in research and development. It's usually it's this Europe 2020. Those are all those programs, but we have to use it more efficiently to get companies out of that very quickly. And I think it's a question for speed, not so much for ideas.
Yeah, you're right, but I guess this market point, for instance, Europe would be the market, right? I'm not saying just Germany. It's like you said, doing this together. We have countries in Europe even that have expertise. Finland, Sweden, they produce hardware. Yeah.
I think there are certain projects in under discussion in order to do exactly that. Not build one company, but strengthen certain areas, like for example the European IPCEIs, where several member states together with the Commission put together money to actually further develop technologies that are that are used. It's not on the basis of research, but it's really to help take off new business on new technologies. Like for example, for cloud, that is actually thought about, and I think it's possible to as Andreas Koenen said, to strengthen something where we already have some expertise and knowledge, and building up it from scratch probably takes longer than 5 years, but where we already have some good companies and knowledge in Europe, I think it's definitely worth strengthening it. The other thing is, when it comes to digital sovereignty, as we said before, we have, for example, with 5G, we have big companies in Europe who produce components. But again, when you look at the production chains, it's really interesting. There are all global for many products, and I think we have to also cope with that. Maybe make them more secure than they used to be. Use the technology to actually also make this a safe way, and have the knowledge in the crucial technologies. I think that should be an ongoing goal, and we can never stop trying to reach that, because it's such a dynamic development.
Right. So I actually have so many questions to ask you all, but I have to take questions from the audience. And so I'll do a few questions from the audience, and then I'll ask you further questions. So what is the recipe to build more awareness for the importance of cybersecurity? The recipe to build more awareness for the importance of cybersecurity?
Yeah, okay, I could take an easy answer. Actually, we have just started a campaign, the BSI and the BMI together, to make people more aware, on one hand, on the threats of cybersecurity or the cyber space especially, and to give them methods at hand to deal with those risks. That's one thing. There's a big campaign. We spend a lot of money during the coming weeks, and we have some media coverage that reaches everyone, and that's important. I think it's very important for our citizens to see and hear more about cybersecurity. So that's a big starting point. On the other hand, it's a full spectrum. Once again, you have to go into education. You have to go into the universities, up to anyone working in a company to make him aware what it is about cybersecurity in all issues. Anyone who deals with digitization and IT in any respect has to be aware it comes always with cybersecurity or with a risk.
Maybe I can add to that. What we do is actually try to put figures to the damages of cyber attacks by an annual study where we try to where we ask companies what kind of attacks they have suffered and what was the consequences of it and how much was it in actual euros, the damage they had, because that we feel that it helps to make the for the managing or CEOs to especially of maybe small and medium-sized companies to actually figure out what is their risk and whether it might be worth investing in security. So we found that helps also in the public debate in raising awareness.
Let me add that actually, according to my experience, if you speak about the cybersecurity awareness for individuals, it's mostly okay because most of people, they use some kind of the cybersecurity tools and they're aware of the bad guys in the cyberspace. Speaking about businesses, they're all of them, most of them, they were victims of the cyber attacks. That they know that. That 10 years ago, there were the issues with their industrial cybersecurity and cybersecurity on a national level, and they had to explain to the government's officials, to the enterprises, the industrial enterprises, the importance of cybersecurity for the industrial sector, for critical infrastructure. Not anymore. Well, actually, everybody is aware of that. What is still missed, it's IoT cybersecurity. There's still most of people, they understand, okay, so there is a computer, there is a cybersecurity for computer. There is a smartphone, there have to be security, cybersecurity for the smartphone. There is an office network, definitely yes. Industrial network, hey, we are living in times of industrial revolution 4.0. You have to connect your industrial system to the internet. Okay, so that's a cyber issues as well. And the people, they forget about Internet of Things. They forget about all these little things around us. The security cameras, which are somewhere there in my office, not in my room, not in my office, outside, somewhere over there in the corridor. Their fire alarm system, the smart locker, etc., etc. It's not the IoT. It's not just your coffee machine or smart fridge at home. It's also there. It's everywhere around us. And actually, that's an issue because the cybersecurity for Internet of Things, it's a headache. Because, well, okay, I can develop the cybersecurity for every smart vacuum cleaner. And you have to install it on your vacuum cleaner, on your fridge at home, on your car, on all the devices at home. And well, actually, you can do it, but who is going to manage all that? How many smart devices you have at home? Many. So the problem is how to manage cybersecurity for all this dozens of the Internet of Things around you. I don't know. The only solution is design it secure by design.
Right, that's an
Make
excellent
it
point.
immune to the cyber threats. That's the only solution. So, and that most of people, they're individuals, their governments, their enterprises, they simply forget about this little stuff. But this is really important.
Well, actually, you're right. It reminded us a few years ago. It started the denial of service attacks with IoT devices.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not just the world. When I say that the world is getting smart, it's not about the computer networks. It's not about some cloud systems which are responsible for the to make this world more flexible. It's also the many little things around us which are connected.
Right. That's an excellent point. Andreas, we have a question for you. Digitalization and sovereignty are the core of Gaia X and IDSA. However, will the initiative really make an impact given only 5% of the industry players are aware of this?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Actually, I have to be honest. I'm not so much don't have so much insight into Gaia X because it's mostly a project of the colleagues of the Ministry of Economics. But let me say the following. Whether Gaia X will be a success or not depends clearly on the question whether there are customers on one hand and whether there are companies offering services to the customers. Clearly, we have to admit that we had some problems even from the government side to see what could be the benefit of Gaia X for the government. But in the meantime, we see that we will have a lot of projects that could use the services of Gaia X for government purposes. For example, at those points where we communicate to our citizens and where it's allowed from the lawful side to put data on Gaia X. Then it's the first choice we should take for government. And government in that respect means not only a federal government, it means especially the states and the communities.
Mm-hmm. Andreas and Susanne, I wanted to ask you a question based on what Eugene mentioned earlier about the IoT. So what do you think about offensive research in Germany? Offensive research in a sense, not about attacking someone else, but about understanding the vulnerability, collecting intelligence, and this requires active research in a sense. So in Germany, this offensive thing is a bit disputed. So do you think we should emphasize this? Do you think there is a need to do more offensive research in Germany? Do you think it would be a good idea to develop tools which would be able to collect intelligence? If you know things, you can prepare yourself and so on. You could prepare, predict attacks. You could identify vulnerabilities if you, for instance, do scanners which search for vulnerabilities and so on.
Yeah, I think it's very important because I'm not only overlooking the BSI and my responsibilities, I also have to overlook what CITES, the central office for the IT of the security agencies, is doing. And that means I have to look into offensive measures and how we could come up to a situation where we see a lawful way to use offensive measures as a federal government. For example, it's the most famous question for hackback. I don't want to discuss it under this rubric again, but we have to have active measures in hand to prevent attacks coming from outside and to make our critical infrastructure safe. That's one thing. On the other hand, even the BSI needs some kind of measures to find out about weaknesses in the German networks. And for example, we are just giving in the IT-Security Law 2.0 the BSI the right to deal with such methods, to do some port scans, to have honeypots available, measures that are mostly used already now in the public, but a federal office isn't allowed to use this up to now. So we have to change that on one hand to be on a better side in preventing attacks, and we have to have it in hand for our police forces and for our intelligence services on the other side. So that means we have to open up these possibilities of doing research in that area. So actually what we're doing in addition is we look again into the most famous paragraph 202 in our penalty code, and so to have to make it possible for researchers to work on this business without being accused in the end to do attacks. So this reform of the 202 is just going on, but will be seen only in the next legislation period.
Well, that is an excellent initiative. That is super important.
May comment. Well, actually, I think this is active. Well, we call it penetration test. This active hack, positive hack. It's not just important; it must be part of the quality control for all the system which we use in the critical infrastructure. It must be the part of the quality control. And actually, what I do, well, actually, we have our own penetration test team, and actually, we do these tests on my own company, on my own office, once a year. And now we not just do it ourselves, but also we employ external companies to hack us, to guarantee the quality of our self-protection. Thank you.
That is, I love this. I mean, you're an Israeli probably, no? I totally
I'm very sorry, I made a DNA test. Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
I think when it comes to penetration tests and that is very important, and I think it's a very many companies use it. But as we have seen from what Andreas said, it's there are many different purposes for what you could do such research, and where you could use the knowledge that you gain from such offensive measures. So I think we have to take we need research, but we have to take a differentiated view, and we have to make it clear that the knowledge we gain is used to improve IT security and not to weaken it. So that's, I think, as long as we talk about making or enable companies to improve their security, then it's absolutely fine to use this. When it comes to actually use it for other purposes, we might have to discuss at one or the other point. But we need to, I think it will always be some kind of a run between the white ones and the black ones in this regard. So it's we have to work on our knowledge on attacks and on the means with which we can make our products and services more resilient. So yeah.
Yeah, so you are a lawyer, and I completely, agree that we need more legislation on this topic in Germany to allow more research. I completely, I think it's an extremely important initiative what Andreas Koenen mentioned, that there is a movement towards this direction, and I completely agree with Eugene that such things are extremely important, and not even once a year, I would say even once a week. So we are developing a lot of such research tools, and not just scanning ports, what penetration testing companies do. We develop really advanced technologies where we can understand from outside a network what happens in your network without that you notice this. And we run such studies without triggering alerts. So, Eugene, I'm not going to tell you if we studied you or not, but we collect a lot of information, and we do a lot of studies on vulnerabilities which are advanced and not something that is done by regular security study firms. And we often have faced this question: is this okay to do what we do? Is this, we are a German federal research institution, so of course our goal, we are doing this to improve security of the Germany and to notify German industry or German entities of any problems that we find to prevent attackers exploiting this. But this is a very important topic for us, so that's why I wanted to ask your position on this.
Yeah, indeed, that's very important, that we have a more careful look at all those methods which could be used in the end to prevent attacks coming from some opponent. That's important. We have to look very careful in the way those measures are constructed, and we have to look careful into the questions: who is the one who applies those measures? And there again, it makes a strong difference whether this is a company that applies some method to another company while being in a contractual relation to each other, or whether it's the state that applies such measures. That's very limited and has to be limited to use those measures. And that's important. Then the second question again is how do we deal with the question of the monopoly of violence? That means it should be only the state who owns such measures to use it to suppress some kind of attack coming from outside. That's a basic principle in Germany, that it can be only a stateful action that goes against such aggressors and, for example, against any kind of espionage happening that way. I don't want to see a kind of digital blackwater here.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, in 2018, we identified vulnerability which allowed, with a single packet, to disconnect networks from the internet. And when running this experiment, we actually really mistakenly disconnected huge networks in a few parts of the world from the internet. So this was extremely publicized, and we stopped the experiment. But these are the type of things which we are doing, and now we found a new vulnerability which allows similar things. I cannot disclose this to you now, but I'm just saying that this is the type of things we're doing. Now the problem is we have so many questions from our audience and we are running out of time. So I will just say 3 questions and any of you can really jump in and say very short answers. So someone, our audience, one of the participants says certification are only a compromise. I think security by design and testing by design should be demanded by all parties, government and economy. It is like math, you either follow them or not, and you see the consequences. Certification also often seems to be behind the developments. A more proactive approach would be to run large-scale simulations and check on attack surface. Any of you wants to comment on that quickly?
Yeah, the earlier the better. That's the answer. Any of those measures have their right to do it. Security by design is necessary. Security by default is necessary. Certification is necessary too. But each of those measures has its own area where it works most perfect.
Mm-hmm. We have a question for Eugene. What about the human factor? Even if we improve cyber technology, the human factor continues to exist. How can we minimize this? This is not all about the awareness of the people using it.
Well, speaking about human factor, did you see the news about Suez Canal and this big ship which blocked the canal? Human factor. Same in the cyber world. So actually, yes, it's important. And actually, this is the question: how to design the technologies which don't depend on the human factor. Technologies which stop the wrong human behavior. And I guess it's a good question. Can we really develop such a technologies? But I think that we have to move on this way. So, well, Homo sapiens is a Homo sapiens. Despite this, if you believe, if you trust scientists, the Homo sapiens, they were designed about 200,000 or 300,000 years ago. So it's quite well. It's really old technology. Of course, it has a lot of bugs, mistakes by design. So we don't really trust Homo sapiens because they do so many mistakes. So we must develop the technologies which fix all this stuff in a different way. Thank you.
Okay, Andreas, which initiatives are there to support the setup of new cyber companies? And does the German government live up to its goals regarding digital sovereignty, or are there areas for improvement?
Clearly, there are a lot of initiatives to set up cyber companies and especially startups in the cybersecurity world in Germany. Together with the colleagues of the Federal Ministry of Economy, we are looking into possibilities to push forward small companies. There are all those startup programs of the colleagues, and indeed, within the Ministry of Interior, we have several projects within this national cybersecurity project to put on smaller companies. The second thing is that we looked into the Konjunkturförderprogramm to set up smaller companies and to give companies more chances in the field of artificial intelligence. There's a huge sum to go into that part. And in addition, there's a similar program for 5G to make this work. In the end, in my opinion, we have to come up within the next legislation period with a more continuous project to make this work, and so that we have a fund where we can promote companies and the work on cybersecurity in general.
Dankeschön für Susanne. Die Frage ist auf Deutsch, wenn aber du auf Englisch antworten könntest, das wäre super. Wenn wir nochmal zum Thema Frauen und Cyber zurückkommen, über die Initiative She Transforms IT hinaus. Was braucht es noch?
What does it need to get more women into cybersecurity? I think it's really important to see to look at the whole life cycle. Basically, I think we definitely have to improve digital education in Germany. We have to show students what they can do, what is actually what does the work look like that you can do in the field of cybersecurity. It's like when I hear you talking, Haya, it's always like it sounds really interesting what you found out, what you're trying to do, what experiments you do. But I think that we really have to improve the transfer of knowledge to young people at school. We find that many, especially we lose the girls at the age of 14, 15, 16. They think, IT is nothing for me. And then even those who start studying, we lose a lot on the way of their studies. So we still have to find out a little more about, because we are actually aware of the problem for a very, very long time yet, but we haven't really succeeded in changing the situation. So I think we really need a holistic approach to this and have to find out the decisive points where we can actually turn the development.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are now coming to an end. I have so much more to discuss with you and our audience as well. We have to do this again. I hope our audience enjoyed today's session as much as I did and we did. and that you gain new insights from our speakers and discussions today. You know, this was a great opportunity to ask all of three of you questions. Thank you so much for taking the time and participating in this event, in our event. Andreas, Koenen, Susanne, Dehmel, and the Eugene Kaspersky. Thanks to all of you. It was great to have you as our guests. I hope we will be able to welcome you again in the future. Now we are separating. We will update you on our website about the next event and the topics of our next event. You're very much welcome to suggest topics. Typically we focus on what is hot, what is important, what is the debate that the general public would like to understand better, and then we dive into this, so you're welcome to make suggestions. Now we are going to separate from you. Thanks to all of you, and stay healthy and have a happy Ostern, frohe Ostern, Chag Sameach, Pesach Sameach, and we'll see you next time.